I wasn't supposed to be there that late. The office had emptied out hours ago, lights dimmed except for the flicker from the vending machine in the corner. My friend had asked me to drop off a charger for her mom, but she'd forgotten to mention her mom's coworker would be the one meeting me. She was leaning against the reception desk, arms folded, eyes steady like she'd been waiting for me longer than she should have. "Your trouble," she said before I'd even opened my mouth. I smirked, more out of reflex than confidence. "Only for the right person." Her lips twitched like she was trying not to laugh, but she didn't answer right away. She just stepped closer, her heels clicking against the tile. The air smelled faintly of coffee gone cold and the faint trace of her perfume, something warm, unfamiliar. She was older, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of calm you only get after life's taught you patience. Hair swept back in a loose bun, sleeves rolled up like she'd been working late too. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew she'd seen through me in less than 10 seconds. "I suppose you're here for Andrea's charger?" she finally asked, turning away to rummage through a desk drawer. "Yeah," I said, watching the way her hand lingered on the drawer handle before she pulled it open. "She said you'd be here." Her head tilted slightly, but she didn't look at me. "She tells me you're younger than you act." It was meant casually, but something in her voice lingered, like she was testing the ground between us. I stepped closer to the desk. "You say that like it's a bad thing." This time, she looked at me directly, and for a second neither of us spoke. There was nothing dramatic about it. No sweeping music, no thunder, just the quiet click in my chest when you realize you're looking too long. She slid the charger across the desk, her fingers brushing mine in a way that felt accidental, but not careless. Her skin was warm, her nails short and clean. "You should get going," she said, voice low. But she didn't move away. Neither did I. The clock on the wall ticked once, loudly, and I caught myself wondering why I suddenly didn't care about the charger, or the fact that my friend was waiting in the car downstairs. "You work here late often?" I asked. "Sometimes," she said, leaning back against the desk now, arms crossed again. "Not usually with company." There was a pause, the kind that feels heavier than the words before it. She was still studying me, like she was trying to decide whether I was harmless or exactly the kind of trouble she didn't need. And then, without breaking that gaze, she said, "You should go before someone sees you here." Her tone wasn't warning, it was something else. Something I wanted to hear again. I took the charger, sliding it into my jacket pocket, but I didn't head for the door. "Not yet." "You don't even know my name," I said. "That's probably for the best," she replied, but her eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. And maybe it was the way the shadows from the vending machine cut across her face, or the fact that she still hadn't stepped aside, but I knew I wasn't leaving this building without seeing her again. When I finally turned to go, her voice followed me into the hallway. "Next time, don't knock." The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. Andrea was still waiting in the car, scrolling on her phone, but the second I saw her, all I could think about was the woman upstairs. The one whose name I still didn't know. I told myself it didn't matter. She was my friend's mom's coworker, older, definitely off limits. But every detail from those 10 minutes in the office wouldn't leave me alone. The way she didn't rush her words. The warmth in her hand when it brushed mine. That night, I lay in bed replaying it, the shadows from my blinds stretching across the ceiling. I kept hearing her say, "Next time, don't knock." The next time came 3 days later. Andrea had asked me to help her mom's office set up new computer monitors. Easy money, she called it. I knew I should say no, but the thought of walking into that dim, quiet space again was enough to make me grab my jacket without overthinking it. When I got there, she was alone in the break room, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. The overhead lights were too bright, and her hair was down this time, falling past her shoulders in loose waves. "You came back," she said without looking up. "You make it sound like I shouldn't have," I said, leaning against the counter. "I'm just wondering if you do this kind of work for everyone, or just people Andrea knows." "Depends," I said. You offering more work? She glanced at me then, really looked the kind of look that feels like a hand pressing lightly against your chest. Careful, she said softly, but I couldn't tell if it was a warning or an invitation. We moved into her office, and I started unpacking the monitors. She sat at her desk, flipping through a stack of papers, but her attention kept drifting. Rough day? I asked. Her mouth pressed into a faint smile. Something like that. She hesitated before adding, I'm just out of a long relationship. The kind that leaves the house feeling too quiet. I nodded, tightening a screw on the monitor stand, but my mind snagged on the way she said it, almost casual, but with an edge that made me want to ask more. Instead, I caught myself watching the way she traced her finger along the edge of a file folder, over and over, like she was keeping herself grounded. When I finished setting up the last screen, I straightened up. That's it. All working. She stood and walked around the desk close enough that I could smell her perfume again, warm, amber, something faintly sweet. You don't have to rush off, she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a second, I just stared at her. My pulse was too fast, my hands suddenly unsure of where to go. She reached out, resting her hand lightly on my forearm, her thumb brushing once before pulling away. Stay a bit. I could use the company. I should have said no. I should have remembered who she was to me, and who she wasn't. But I didn't. I sat across from her on the small couch in her office, a mug of coffee in my hands I didn't remember agreeing to. She turned off the harsh overhead lights, leaving only the desk lamp glowing between us. It felt like a different room entirely, softer, quieter. She was telling me about a book she was reading, but halfway through her sentence she stopped. Her gaze dropped to my hands. You've got a scar there, she said, pointing to the faint line across my knuckle. I looked down, flexing my fingers. Old fight. Stupid one. Her voice lowered. Someone hurt you? I shrugged. We hurt each other. She leaned back slightly, but didn't break eye contact. You're too young to talk like that. Something in her tone made me want to tell her everything, the nights I couldn't sleep, the things I didn't say out loud. Instead, I laughed quietly and sipped the coffee. She shifted closer on the couch. Not enough to touch, but close enough that the air felt thinner between us. Her phone buzzed on the desk. She ignored it. I glanced at the caller ID. You're not going to answer? No, she said quickly, almost too quickly. It's complicated. I didn't push, but my mind filled in the blanks. A recent breakup. Someone still trying to reach her. She must have noticed the question in my eyes, because she added, Some people don't understand when it's over. There was a weight in the way she said it, like maybe she wasn't entirely convinced herself. When I set the mug down, my knee brushed hers. Neither of us moved. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You look at people like you're trying to memorize them. I swallowed hard. Maybe I am. Her lips curved slightly, but before she could reply, there was a knock on the door. We both straightened instantly. The spell cracked. Come in, she called, her voice even, though I noticed her hands smoothing her hair. A young guy from the IT department poked his head in, asking about a file transfer. She handled it quickly, her tone brisk, the professional mask back in place. The door closed again. Silence. I stood, more to steady myself than to leave. Don't. She cut in, standing too. You don't have to go yet. Her hand found my wrist this time, holding it just a second longer than necessary. And in that second I knew, if I stayed, we might not come back from whatever this was. We didn't talk about what had almost happened in her office. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. I'd stopped by the building to drop something off for Andrea's mom, and she was standing outside in the drizzle, no umbrella, staring at something in the distance. Forgot how to come in out of the rain? I asked. She turned toward me slowly. Her hair was damp, darkened at the edges, but she didn't seem to care. I just needed air. Something in her voice told me the air wasn't the only thing she needed. I hesitated before stepping closer. Rough day? Her eyes softened, not the guarded look she wore at work, but something closer to tired honesty. I told him not to call me anymore, she said quietly. And he didn't take it well. I didn't have to ask who he was. You okay? I will be. She almost smiled, but it faded. But it's strange. You get used to someone being there, and then the silence feels heavier than it should. We moved under the awning, but the rain kept drifting sideways, catching her cheekbones in silver drops. I watched one slide down to the corner of her mouth before I caught myself staring. You shouldn't look at me like that, she said. How am I looking at you? Like you're not afraid to start something you can't finish. I felt my chest tighten. Maybe I'm not. Her breath hitched almost imperceptibly, but she didn't step back. You don't know what that would mean for me, she whispered. Then tell me. Her laugh was short, almost bitter. It would mean undoing years of telling myself I don't need someone. Years of pretending I don't notice the way certain people make me feel seen. That word, seen, landed harder than it should have. We stood there, rain tapping on the metal above us, both of us too still. My hand lifted before I thought better of it, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. My knuckles grazed her temple. She closed her eyes for the briefest moment. Don't, she said, but it was softer than the rain. I can't help it, I murmured. Her eyes opened, locking onto mine, and for a moment neither of us was breathing. You should walk away, she said. Do you want me to? She didn't answer. She just looked at me like she was weighing every possible consequence, and finding them all equally dangerous. The rain's rhythm filled the pause between us. Then, finally, she asked, If I said no, would you stay? The rain had stopped by the time we went inside. Her office felt warmer than it had before, maybe because I was still carrying the heat from her question outside. If I said no, would you stay? It was still echoing in my head when she closed the door behind us. I thought we'd pick up right where we left off. We didn't. She walked to her desk, opening a drawer and pulling out a slim, faded photograph. She stared at it for a long moment before placing it on the desk between us. I stepped closer. It was an old picture, maybe 20 years ago, of her and a man I didn't recognize, and standing between them was a younger girl. You know her, she said, her voice steady but quieter than usual. I looked closer. My stomach dropped. It was my older sister. She worked here for a summer, she continued. We were close, not in that way, but I cared about her. She used to tell me stories about her little brother. The one who never stopped asking questions. The one she said would either break hearts or get his broken. I didn't know what to say. My sister had passed away 3 years ago, and hearing someone talk about her like she just stepped out of the room knocked the air out of me. She never mentioned you, I finally said. Her eyes softened. And you never mentioned her. I swallowed, running my thumb over the edge of the photograph. I didn't think you'd. I trailed off, not sure how to finish. Matter? Be connected? Mean this much already? She stepped closer, her presence familiar now in a way that was almost unbearable. I think that's why this feels dangerous, she admitted. Because I'm not meeting you for the first time. In some strange way, I've already known you, through her. My chest tightened. The air between us wasn't just charged anymore, it was heavy with something I couldn't name. You think that makes it wrong, I said. I think it makes it harder to pretend it's harmless. Her phone buzzed on the desk again, but neither of us moved. I'm not my sister, I said, the word sharper than I meant. She didn't flinch. I know. But she mattered to me. And if I... She broke off, looking away. If I let this go further, I don't know if I'm honoring her or betraying her. That hit harder than I expected. I wanted to tell her my sister would have teased me about this, not judged me, but the truth stuck in my throat. I set the photograph down gently, meeting her eyes. So what happens now? She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me for a long time, the kind of look that feels like a decision being made in real time. Then she whispered, "Now you tell me if you're going to walk away, or make me forget why I should let you." The photograph still lay between us, a quiet witness to everything we hadn't said. Her hand rested near it, fingers curled slightly, as if letting go of it would mean letting go of her reasons. "I've been trying to convince myself to walk away," she said finally. "Since the first time you came in." "Have you?" My voice was lower than I intended. "Yes. But I haven't done it yet, have I?" There was no heat in her tone, no teasing, just the blunt truth, dropped between us like a stone. I stepped closer, not trusting myself to say more. My hand hovered over hers, not touching yet. "You remind me of her," she continued. "Not in how you look, but in how you don't hide what you want. She had that same way of standing in a room, like she belonged there before anyone invited her in." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "And is that why you can't?" "It's why I'm afraid to," she said. Her eyes searched mine, looking for the thing that might let her step over the line without losing herself. "Because if I care about you, I'll care too much. I don't do halfway." That was the moment. I could have told her it wasn't worth the risk. I could have walked out and made it easier for both of us. Instead, I said, "Then don't do halfway." Something shifted in her face, not quite relief, not quite surrender. She reached up, brushing her fingers against my jaw, a touch so careful it felt like a question. And I didn't answer with words. I stepped in, closing the space, letting my forehead rest against hers. For a long moment, we just breathed together, the air thick with everything we'd been circling around since that first night. Her voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. "If we do this, you can't disappear on me. I've had enough of people who can't stay." "I'm not going anywhere," I said. And I meant it, even though I knew I was promising more than I understood. Her thumb traced my cheekbone once before she pulled back just enough to look at me. "You're trouble," she murmured, the same words she'd used the first time we met. "Only for the right person," I replied. She smiled then, small, but real, and finally let her hand fall away. "Then I guess I'm the right person." We didn't kiss, not yet. We didn't need to. The decision had already been made, and it hung between us, undeniable. Somewhere in the building, a door closed. Footsteps echoed faintly down the hall. Neither of us moved. Because for the first time since we met, the question wasn't if, it was when. The photograph of my sister still sat on her desk. She hadn't put it away. I think she wanted me to see it every time I came in, a reminder that we didn't get here by accident. One afternoon I finally asked, "What was she like when you knew her?" She smiled softly. "Brave. Impulsive. Honest to a fault." Then her eyes flicked to mine. "Sound familiar?" I laughed under my breath. "She'd probably be making fun of us right now. She'd probably be telling me not to mess this up," she said quietly. That was the moment I realized the regret I'd felt, about my sister, about all the years since she'd been gone, had shifted into something else. Not gone. Just lighter. Because this woman in front of me wasn't replacing anyone. She was her own gravity. And for her, I think the longing she'd been carrying, the quiet, unspoken kind, had turned into something with shape, something she could actually hold. We didn't make a big declaration. We didn't tell Andrea's mom. Not yet. But we made a promise, standing in that office with the sound of the vending machine humming in the corner, the same one from the night we met. She said, "If we're going to do this, we do it fully. No halfway." And I told her. I already decided that. Walking out of the building that day, I realized the danger we'd been circling wasn't about rules, or age, or anyone finding out. The real danger was how easy it was to start imagining a life that included her in every corner of it. And maybe that was the point. Some people you meet by chance. Others, it feels like you've been moving toward them your whole life, even if you didn't know it. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?